Britain has a new Prime Minister, and the last time he made headlines about housing, he was asking for the power to freeze rent. So if you're an investor buying UK property, it might be a good time to understand what's happening right now. I've been in real estate and helping property investors start and scale property portfolios across the UK for the last 6 years now, and regulation changes like these are the times in which you can make the most amount of money and lose the most amount of money in your investment. So in this video, I'm going to explain to you all of the changes coming to UK property under this new government and how it affects you as a property investor in the UK. Okay, so to understand what will happen, we need to understand our Prime Minister, Andy Burnham, and his views on property investment on the whole. So why were people worried? Back in 2023, when he was the Mayor of Greater Manchester, he wrote to Parliament asking for rental controls, which would give them the opportunity to put a legal cap on how much a landlord could ask for the rent from a tenant. And the first thing he did when he got the job is bring back Angela Rayner as Housing Secretary. This means that she is now in charge of all things housing, and she actually pushed through all of the new legislation that came in about renting in the last year. So that's why a lot of people within the property industry braced on the 20th of July when Andy Burnham walked into power. What happened since is not what a lot of people actually expected. So the two things he hasn't done. Rayner confirmed within weeks that they're not looking to bring in rent controls in England, and actually quoted what happened in Scotland when they brought them in and how rents didn't really come under control at all. If you paid attention to what happened in Scotland over the last few years, they brought in this rent control, things didn't improve at all and actually got worse when you look at annual increases in terms of rents every single year. This basically means that the rent that you're asking from your tenants isn't going to be capped, and you can increase that every year in line with what the market is asking. Then we've got stamp duty, which is obviously the tax that you have to pay every time you buy an investment property. If the place isn't going to be your home, and the likelihood is you're buying this through a limited company, you're going to have to pay the additional charge of stamp duty. So on a property worth £220,000, that's going to be £12,900 as a fee you have to pay when you buy the property. You have to pay it in cash, and there's no way around it, and you have to spend this before you spend any money on the property yourself. So obviously you need to make sure that that's calculated in when you're looking at your numbers. There had been talks of scrapping it or replacing it in line with the changes that's going on with council tax, but Burnham confirmed that this isn't going to happen this year and it won't be announced during the budget. And to be honest, even if this did come into play in the next few years, there's going to be a lot of talk and probably quite a bit of criticism around what that looks like for property investors and if it's actually worth bringing in at all. So the two things people were worried about and actually expected to be brought in haven't come in. The thing that has done that genuinely matters for property came in Sheffield on the 31st of July. He confirmed that the mayors in the big cities of England can now retain a portion of the tax that they get from their own area. At the moment, when a mayor brings a big employer to the city, nearly all of that tax that's generated from that employer goes back down to London. Under the new system, the city keeps a portion of it. That means whoever runs Manchester, Liverpool or Birmingham makes money by growing their economy. This is part of the plan that's sitting alongside the number 10 of the North that's going to be based in Manchester rather than London. This is exactly what it sounds like. It's the Prime Minister's second office, which is obviously based in a regional area. This is on top of the biggest council house building programme since the war. None of that hands you a tenant directly or makes sure that you've got a good property, but what it does do, it decides which locations get good strong fundamentals like strong employers, good transport links and institutional investment. And what you can be confident on is that rental demand and capital growth follow these things. The challenge is none of this is funded yet, and the Times have stated that it's £1.8 billion that's been promised without any explanation of where that money has come from. Burnham has announced John Healey as his Chancellor, the minister who writes and announces the budget. So on the 28th of October, he's going to deliver his first one and announce exactly what's going to be taxed. This is what's actually important to pay attention to though, because the money has to come from somewhere, and the last two budgets found their money within property. There are also two deadlines that Burnham inherited within property rather than being announced, and those are both law already. From 2027, if you own property in your personal name, rent is taxed at its own rate. So where you'd pay 20, 40 or 45% on money earned, rent is actually going to be charged at 22, 42 42 and 47%. And again, if you own the property in your personal name, this rental income is put on top of your income overall. So if you're already on a decent wage, which if you're watching this, you probably are, you're paying 42% tax on the first pound that property earns. So if you don't already own your properties in a limited company, this is just another reason why this should be something on your radar right now. It's not free to do, and you're going to have to pay certain fees. So it does depend on the properties you own, your tax situation, and how long you want to be in property for. So the best thing for you to do is speak to a qualified tax accountant and get the right advice for you specifically. The bigger one to be aware of is October 2030. This date has changed a couple of times over the last few years, but make no doubt about it, this will be coming into law at some point. The most a landlord is expected to pay to get their property up to this scratch has been reduced from 15 grand to £10,000. But if you miss this deadline, you might have a fine that's up to £30,000 per property. 2030 sounds far away, but if you bought a property today and put it on a 5-year fix, or if you're remortgaging or refinancing any of your properties and putting them onto a 5-year fix, by the time that fix comes to an end, that deadline has already passed. On an older terrace property that's worth £110,000 that's got a D or an E EPC rating, that 10 grand is close to a tenth of the value of that property and doesn't put a single penny in your pocket. On a house that's built this year or already has an EPC rating of A or B, that's no cost to you at all. This is why looking at legislation and regulation changes are super important when you're deciding your strategy. A lot of people, when they're starting out, look at cheap, affordable properties, but don't think about the costs that are going to cost them further down the line when getting them up to scratch. So if you're buying buy-to-lets and you want to be hands-off, you need to be conscious of the standard of the property and the EPC ratings alongside that. So although there's a lot of things that you might need to be conscious of when investing in the UK property market, none of these things make the UK market a bad place to put your money right now. And in some ways, it actually makes it a better one. It's putting pressure on poor landlords that don't look after their properties and making space for a more professionalised setup. And this is all while certain locations in the country, property prices are still likely to dip, especially when you're looking in the southeast and places like that. The problem right now is still the work involved. It takes a lot of time to attend viewings, negotiate with developers or vendors, and chase solicitors. And to be honest, this is usually the exact job that people are trying to avoid while still trying to scale a long-term property portfolio. That's the part that we handle at Freighter Property Partners, where our clients end up buying and holding good quality buy-to-let properties secured at discounts of 10 to 12% by us. And that's not just a marketed discount, that is 10 to 12% below what people are paying on the market right now. So if you're looking to invest in UK property right now, there's a link below and you can have a free chat with me directly to see if we're the right company to help you. But now let's look at how the market is already reacting to all of this. The short answer is that borrowing money, i.e. mortgages, has become more expensive this year rather than cheaper. When we came into 2026, a lot of people expected rates to come down, but with everything going on in the wider global market, rates have actually drifted back to somewhere in the region of 4.75% today. That's in part because the Bank of England haven't been able to cut the base rate, which is the number that banks follow when they're looking at what they're going to charge you. And it can't cut it when inflation stays above the target, which it has done all year, of this 2% that the Bank of England tried to achieve. With this, one of the main reasons for this is global instability and everything that's going on in the Middle East right now, which is obviously really unfortunate, and not many people expected that at the start of this year. In real money, Zoopla reckons that the typical buyer is now paying $1,500 more a year than they were back in January. And obviously, as an investor, that comes straight off your profit. So if you've been waiting for rates to drop before you buy, then you're probably going to be waiting a little bit longer, and you're going to be stuck with that for 2 to 5 years. Essentially, you shouldn't be waiting around. If you've got the money and you can deploy that, then now is the time to do it. So that's borrowing, but what's less obvious is what those same rates have done to prices. The number of house sales agreed is down by 9%, with July being the quietest month of 2026. But what that means is fewer buyers means less competition and more opportunities to get really good deals. House prices nationwide are still going up, but only just in and around 2%. So the challenge is, if you buy at market value, you can't just rely on the capital growth if you're just buying in anywhere in the country. What you want to do is buy well and get that equity at the point of purchase. And if you're targeting the right places like Yorkshire, the Northwest and the Midlands, you're likely to have significantly better growth than this 2% anyway. As we've discussed in previous videos, the UK market is very much split, and you should be targeting areas areas primed for long-term growth, where affordability is strong and you've got strong fundamentals, away from the southeast. When rents rise faster than prices, then your yield improves. And again, the national figure hides the important part though. This is because rents in the northeast grew by 6.3% in 1 year compared to London, which was just 2.2%. And this is pretty easy to follow because prices are following the exact same thing. The Midlands, North, Wales and Scotland are all growing at a reasonable rate, all while London and the southeast are falling flat or actually dropping in prices. So that's the data. Let me tell you what I think personally about it. In my opinion, it's not about the national numbers, it's about how far the two halves have drifted apart from each other. Prices in the south and the southeast are flat, if not dropping, whereas the Midlands and everywhere further north, prices are still rising reasonably. Rents are growing more in more affordable locations as well, with the northeast rental growth 3 times that of London. And now with these changes with the PM, the government are pointing their money across to these regions as well, away from London. I personally don't think this is a coincidence, and I don't think this changes quickly either. This is because regeneration, job opportunities, transport links all take a number of years to implement and then to have a knock-on effect as well. What I'd be watching for though is the budget on the 28th of October, because that's where we're finding out where these promises are actually going to be funded from. And to be honest, I could be wrong about that because no one knows exactly what's going on until Healey announces it on that date. So no matter how dramatic the coverage gets over the next few months, UK property investment is definitely not finished. What it does mean though is that the rules in the last 18 months have changed more than the last 30 years prior to that, and things are still moving. The difficulty is though that keeping up with it takes more time and more local knowledge than it did 5 years ago. This is why clients that work with us end up with a second income without having to create themselves a second job, because they can lean on us for knowledge and insights. And to be honest, it's why most of them come back time and time again, because they already have a good job and their focus is on that. We come from the property perspective. If you're interested, check the link in the description and you can have a free chat with me directly. We'll talk about what you're trying to build, and then what we can do is discuss what we're launching in the next few months and see if our model works for you. But thanks again. I'll see you in the next one.